Okay, hi everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the first of my Industry Insider coffee chats. This is specifically for the analytical and STEM fields. So I know there's going to be a wide range of people on here. I'm just going to start by giving a little brief introduction of myself, and then I'll open it up for questions. I want this really just to be a casual space where you guys feel comfortable to ask any questions you want. So yeah, my name is Holly Anderson. I'm a senior here at USC. I'm majoring in industrial and systems engineering, and then I also have a minor in business finance. So I'm involved in both Viterbi and Marshall, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are too. In terms of what I'm involved in USC outside of class, I'm part of IISE, which is the Institute of Industrial and Systems Engineers. I was the consulting chair for this past school year, which was super awesome. I got to connect with a lot of recruiters at consulting companies and put on an event for that. I'm also part of SWE, which is the Society of Women Engineers. And then something that I did spend a lot of my time doing my freshman through junior year was something called Mission Science. This is through Viterbi Impact Program, and basically once a week, I would travel to an elementary school in the LA area and teach a STEM lesson to a group of fourth and fifth graders every week, which was just really rewarding. It was a way to give back to the LA community. I also love kids and love teaching, so that was super fun for me. And then I'm also in Pi-Phi, and I was on the philanthropy committee for this, which was really rewarding. And then in terms of job experience, after my freshman year, I interned at a construction management company called Aldridge Electric. The following summer, I was at another construction management company called FH Passion. Then I realized that construction management wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. So I switched gears and started recruiting for consulting. This past summer, I interned at KPMG doing consulting, which is under their advisory branch. And I also got a full-time offer, so we'll be going there after graduation. And I'm really, really excited about that. So now I want to turn it over to you guys. Feel free to unmute. You guys can turn on your cameras. Feel free to introduce yourself, maybe say grade, major, anything like that. Or if you want to just type your questions in the chat. But again, I want this to really just be an opportunity for you guys to get any questions you have answered. So, yeah. Hi, Asia. You can go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Holly. Thank you so much for your time and for this introduction. My name's Asia. I'm also a senior and I'm majoring in arts technology and the business of innovation. I am actually curious how if you have any knowledge on how someone with like a non-traditional path could break into the same industry you're trying to get into. For some context, my major is the intersection of design, business, and computer science. And we have a more creative take on entrepreneurship. And what the roles that I'm applying to at the moment are marketing, but I do have technical skill sets. So I was kind of wondering if you have any advice on any like someone with my background or a more non-traditional background breaking into the same industry you're in.
Yeah, for sure. I think, first of all, I think a lot of it is just going to be kind of branding yourself and standing up for yourself. So, like, for example, for me, I'm in an engineering major and I'm going into consulting, which isn't necessarily like the typical standard. But I think sometimes that can even give you a leg up in these positions. I know when I was going through recruiting, a lot of times the interviewers would ask me like, "Oh, how do you think your major matches to a consulting position?" And I think the biggest thing is just not to be intimidated by this and kind of just defend where you're coming from. I think, like you said, like intersecting like technical skills, but also with that creative is like exactly what would fit in marketing. Like, which similarly for me, like I would just kind of back myself up and defend. I'm like, oh, well, engineering is all about problem solving. I've learned how to work in teams. I've learned how to be collaborative. And I think that that will translate really well to consulting. So I think kind of just like defending your position and making an argument for yourself, like it might not seem super apparent right off the front, but if you kind of try to argue that for yourself, I think that um, they would definitely see you as an asset to their team.
Okay, thank you. And I have a follow-up question to that, and
Mhm.
I was wondering if you could share a little bit of some of the strategies you used to kind of tell that story and your narrative to get into consulting.
Yeah, for sure. I think just in general, while practicing for interviews, I think it's super, super helpful to actually end up saying your answers out loud. I would practice with like my roommates or like my siblings or even my parents, just or even just talking to yourself, like if you're on a walk or just saying it in the mirror. I know it sounds kind of silly, but just saying those answers out loud a couple times before you go and say them live in an interview, you're going to come off a lot more confident. It definitely doesn't have to be like a rehearsed script where like you know every single word that you're gonna say, but I think just kind of running through it a couple times and saying it out loud, you'll definitely become more confident and while you're saying it, it'll come off as sounding more true versus you trying to like come up with something in the moment. I think that definitely is also true for like having a little elevator pitch. Like a lot of times in interviews, they're gonna just start by saying like, "Okay, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?" And obviously you know about yourself, but even still, like just rehearsing that and like trying to get it in that like 1 minute range. I think just saying it out loud, whether it's to yourself, to someone else, definitely is helpful.
Okay, thank you. And I know we have like almost 40 people in the room right now, so I don't want to be the
No,
only
no,
one
you're all
asking
good. I
questions.
appreciate the participation.
Of course. I was wondering, could we connect with you on LinkedIn and would it be
Yeah,
possible
for
for you to
sure.
drop it in the chat?
Yes, I will drop it in the chat. And then I also do have my email on here. If any of you guys are interested in following up, you can send me an email to do like a one-on-one talk or anything like that. And then also on this slide, I have my other upcoming coffee chats, which will just be a very similar layout to this. So if any of your questions are unanswered after this, you're more than welcome to drop into those as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, there's a question in the chat. It says, I was curious about how you approach applying to internships and whether or not you wanted to pursue a specific field or any field that was available. I think that's a really good question. I think one of the hardest things about finding an internship and finding a job is really figuring out what you actually want to do. I think that's a really important first step. Um, as you can see from my experience, I definitely didn't know what I wanted to do at first. I had two construction management internships and really gave those a try. I got into this through like a personal connection, and I thought it was kind of just better to have some experience rather than nothing. But then shortly I learned that this wasn't what I wanted to do forever. So then I got interested in consulting. This is something that a lot of people in my major started going into. So I heard a lot about it through my classes and things like that, and it kind of just piqued my interest. And then the more I looked into it, the more people I talked to, I thought that it would be a good fit for me. So then when I applied to internships, I definitely still kept my options open. As you guys know, it's very hard to get from that applying step to securing the interview. So I think it's definitely better to kind of keep your options open at first, especially while you're, I don't know what grade you are, but especially when you're younger, I think it's definitely good to explore all the options. Then you can definitely narrow it down as you go on. Oh, you're a junior. Perfect. Yeah. But I think, yeah, so while applying to internships, I think definitely like keep your options open. Like I know on a handshake, you can kind of go through and like look on there, even just looking up internships on LinkedIn or just online. Like it never hurts to apply and go through the process. I always recommend even if it might not be like your dream job or your dream internship, even just going through the steps of applying, the steps of, tailoring your resume or making a cover letter, things like that. Going through that practice is going to be super, super helpful. And then if you do get that interview, that'll also be really good practice. Again, even if it's not something you end up doing, or even if you get the offer and decide that you don't want to do it, I think going through those steps is super, super beneficial. And there's nothing better than going through it live and having that live practice. So hopefully that answers your question, but feel free to follow up if you have any other remaining thoughts. Um, Okay, Paul asked, what questions did you ask on your interview to evaluate KPMG's culture? Okay, so I actually did a program with KPMG after my sophomore year. It was called KPMG Women in Advisory, and this was a really cool program that they put on where I actually went down to their training facility in Florida for 3 days. And this was like before I even had like an interview with them or anything. It was just a separate program. So being there, I definitely got a feel for their culture. I got to talk to a lot of employees. They put on like a bunch of panels and presentations. So I got to like meet a lot of people, hear a lot about what they do there and what the type of people are, like what their values are in the company and everything like that. But also during, I guess specifically during my interview, one of my favorite questions to ask during interviews is it kind of sounds a little bit dark at first, but I feel like it really brings out a lot of truth in people's jobs. So I've actually stole this from someone else who was giving me tips when I was going through my recruiting process. But the question is, on the days that you wanted to quit, why didn't you? And I think this really just goes to show what about a company is keeping people there. A lot of times people are going to stay at a company for a long amount of time, whether this is 5, 10, 20 years. And there's definitely going to be days where your job isn't your favorite thing in the world, where you're kind of dreading going to work, doing your task or whatever it is. But there's definitely something that is keeping them at the company. And I found that asking this question really brings out, they'll talk about maybe a personal connection that they have at work that's really important to them, or just like the dynamic of their team that keeps them going, or things like that. So I found that asking that is a really good way to find a little bit more about their culture. Okay, we have another question with mixed industries, and last was operations management. How would you advise breaking into consulting, and what field should I venture into because it's quite confusing? Yes, I definitely sympathize with you on that. I think I even interned at KPMG this summer and am going there full time, and I still don't have a total understanding of all the different fields. It's very complicated, and also within every company, it's very different. So I totally understand the confusion that you're feeling. In terms of breaking into consulting, I think just like going online and like looking into it. I mean, there's so many different consulting companies. There's big companies, small companies, and they're all going to be a little bit different. But you can really learn a lot by just looking either like on LinkedIn, looking through different companies, or just going on like if you know like the big four, like KPMG, PwC, EY, or McKinsey, Bain, like you can go on their websites and kind of just look through like what they offer, the people that work there, the types of projects that they're doing. You'll learn a lot about what interests you just by going through that. And then in terms of what field you should venture into, this is something that I think really just depends on what you're interested in. But while you're applying to jobs, I think something that's very helpful is looking at like the job description or like the required skills and seeing maybe where you align most. I remember when I was applying to consulting internships, there were like so many on the websites. Like I decided I wanted to do consulting, but then I went on the website and was like so overwhelmed. But then once you start looking through it, you can kind of narrow it down. Like if you actually click on the offering, normally it'll be like recommended majors or like required skills. And you can kind of just go through it and be like, okay, where do I fit in most? Where am I going to most align to? But also if there's something that interests you and your major isn't listed there, that I also would encourage you to not just rule it off completely. Like I said to Asia, you can kind of argue yourself as a valuable component of a team if you think that you would be a fit. But generally, I would say kind of just going through those job descriptions, seeing where you align most, will probably give you like the best benefit in terms of getting to that next step. Okay, we have another question from Connor. How did you go about finding internships as an underclassman? What platform, how many applications, etc.? Okay, yeah. I think this is a really good question. In terms of how many applications, again, this is totally going to depend on what industry, what position you're going for, and things like that. I think it's kind of hard to give a set number. I mean, I know people that have applied to like 100 internships and not gotten anything, and then I know people who have applied to three and gotten really lucky with that. So I think it just really depends. What platform? I think Handshake and LinkedIn are both really good places to find what positions are available and like just finding other companies that you might not be aware of. But then in terms of actually applying to the jobs, I normally would then go to the actual company website. I think it just is a little bit more direct, and sometimes Handshake and things like that like do have postings that actually aren't open. But I think, yeah, I would say Handshake is a really good way to find positions, find things that interest you, and find different companies that maybe you're not aware of. And then also LinkedIn. I would say those are probably my two biggest. Okay, Asia, you have another question?
Hi, yes, I do. I remember you referring back to some of the projects that you did during your internship, and I was wondering if you could tell us what your favorite project was.
Yeah, for sure. So while I was at KPMG this summer, I was put on one project, and I'm not ex allowed to like say exactly what I did, but I was working for a federal and state agency which was super interesting. This was something that like I didn't know if I would like right away, but then it actually was super, super cool. Something that I also, I mean, again, this is going to depend on everybody, but something that I really liked about my internship this summer was how much teamwork there was. Like, I never really was doing tasks by myself. Like, even if I had something to do, I would always go and then check it with like my manager or the senior associate on my team. And I was working really closely with them. And that's just the type of dynamic that I really like. Even in my major and my minor, like the projects that I do, we work really, really closely together. So I have good practice with that. And I just really enjoyed that team dynamic. I felt that nothing that I did, whether it was right or wrong, was really going to like sway the project 100%. So I think it made it just a little less heavy pressure. Again, obviously, this is going to totally depend what industry you're in, what type of project you're on. But I think that that was why I ended up liking my project so much for me personally. Okay, we have. Okay. This question, I am an international student, and sometimes when I'm applying, there's a common question, are you going to need sponsorship? I usually opt yes, but I don't know how the opt visa works. Do you know how opt works? Okay, unfortunately, I do not have much knowledge on this matter. I can refer you to, I'll drop my manager's email in the chat, and she definitely will have. Sorry, let me just grab it off my phone really fast. She definitely will have more information for you on this. She works at the Career Center, so she's like very involved with all of that. Um, I just unfortunately do not have much experience with that, but she will definitely be a help for you. Okay, Jonathan said he's a sophomore majoring in applied math and minoring in business finance. He's wondering what type of internships should I apply for and what should I search for in Handshake or LinkedIn? What industry you should aim for because you're not sure what you're interested in. Yeah, I totally understand that. I think you kind of come from a similar background as me, where like you really could go into whatever, so it's really hard to narrow down what you want to do. Um, like I said, I think it's definitely good to keep your options open at first. In terms of like looking for internships on Handshake or LinkedIn, I think you can, I know on Handshake you can like upload your resume and then it'll like kind of help you find matches from there. Like like I was saying with the job descriptions, it'll kind of have a list of jobs that are looking for your major, your minor. But also just going through like and exploring like you could look up like internships for applied math majors or something like that. And I think just kind of perusing through, reading the descriptions, reading what the role might entail, you'll kind of start to get an idea of what you're interested in, what you're not interested in. It's also kind of hard, I know, to read a job description and you're not really going to know what you would be doing in that position. But I think it never hurts to apply. You could always apply, and then get to know more about the company. Sorry, I'm just gonna ask you guys to go on mute, if you're not talking, just so we can keep the background noise down. Thank you. Um, but another thing I would say in terms of learning what industry you want to be in is just talking to people. Like whether that's like jo I mean, joining coffee chats, like this is a great way to do that, or just like if you're talking to your teachers, if they mention something that sounds interesting to you, I'm sure they could connect you to different people, or just going on again, like going on LinkedIn or going on the Trojan Network, and looking at alumni who are working in different companies, and you're like, oh, I wonder like what it's like to work at that company. Something about people who went to USC is, for the most part, they're very willing to help other people who are at USC. So you can always like send them a cold email. Like this is something that I did doing throughout my recruiting process, just sending a cold email and being like, "Hi, I'm Jonathan. I'm a sophomore at USC. I saw your LinkedIn and I'm really curious about your position here. Would you be open to a 15-minute chat so I can learn a little bit more about what you do?" I think just like going through things like that, talking to alumni or even like juniors and seniors who've done internships, like if you hear someone's mentioned something or see their LinkedIn, and talking through it, like again, through talking to people, you'll start to kind of get an idea. It's like, oh wait, that sounds kind of interesting. Like I could see myself doing that, or I'd be willing to try that out for a summer or something like that. Um, I think that's a really good way to do it. But again, like I said, like I did an internship, I went through the whole thing, and then I realized it wasn't for me and kind of had to switch gears. So I wouldn't say it's definitely, I mean, I would say it's definitely normal to kind of be overwhelmed and not really know exactly what you want to do. I mean, you're only a sophomore, you have a lot of time, you still have a lot of time to figure out what you want to do. But yeah, I would just say utilize your network, reach out to teachers, reach out to peers, alumni, and things like that. And just through talking to them, you'll get to learn a little bit more about what you like and what you dislike. Okay, we have another question. Second year graduated student in computer data science and expect to find a full-time position in analytics. Do you have advice for the analytics job in STEM? I don't know exactly what you mean. I don't know if you're gearing ex more towards like applying towards an analytic job in STEM. I don't know if you want to maybe just clarify a
Yeah,
little bit more.
yeah.
Just
Hi,
like, oh yeah, hi.
hi, my name is Rita, and I saw your job experiences well in three different companies, and I
Mhm.
just searched like this company are more like to the engineering field. But I'm wondering like because I'm more like analytics and
Mhm.
data analytics or marketing or something like a business. So can you give us like some advice for the analytical stuff like in these companies, or do you have any familiar experiences for the like analytics? And yeah, I just curious. I'm sorry I'm late for this
Oh no,
meeting.
you're fine. You're totally
Yeah,
good.
because
This is
first 5 minutes
yeah,
I don't know
you're
anything
welcome to
about.
drop in, drop one out whenever. I mean, it's the whole hour session, but you guys definitely don't have to stay around for the whole thing, so no worries.
Yeah, so just curious about like these three companies are very like large title and something I'm really interested in. So uh but for the analytics job, I still like curious about like um is there any do you have any like familiar experience or project you can share or something else?
Yeah, I don't really have too much experience in analytics. I know that the name of this coffee chat is Analytical and STEM. I was kind of trying to incorporate, we broke down the industry insiders just into three different fields, which obviously there's so many more majors and different fields within that. So I tried to encompass like Viterbi and Marshall under this umbrella of analytical and STEM. But in terms of like specific advice, I don't really have anything different. I think everything that I'm saying would kind of go um, the same way. I think analytical positions, like if you're looking for a position in analytics, like again, you can search on Handshake, you can search on LinkedIn, or even just look up jobs online, like analytical jobs or like jobs for data science background. And then all my advice would kind of be the same from there on out.
Okay, got it. And also quick questions because I saw
Hmm.
you working the Aldridge Electric
Hmm.
and Pastran. These are very large engineering companies. So can you share any interesting things about your project or what do you have done really like stand out to share to us? Because I'm very curious about your like very fabulous like experiences here.
Yeah, for sure. So I interned at Aldridge after my freshman year, and my project at this was like an electrical upgrade and an improvement of a wastewater treatment plant. So that was like super interesting. Although I'm not ultimately doing this for my career path, I did really enjoy my time there. It was super fun. I got to wear like steel-toed boots and a hard hat and got to like walk around in a construction vest and like take pictures of the site and stuff like that, which was super fun for me. I just found that ultimately this wasn't what I wanted to do long term. But I still think that I learned a lot about what I liked and disliked in work. Similarly to my internship at KPMG, both at Aldridge and Passion, I was working in teams. The thing about these teams is they were much smaller. So it was me and then an assistant project manager and then my project manager. And that was pretty much it on the team. But again, like I'm someone who loves working on a team, loves working really closely with people. And so this was really good for me. I just think that again, it's going to be different for everybody. Like I know people who don't like working in a team, they'd rather do everything by themselves, and that's totally fine. But just for me personally, I really liked this. I liked getting feedback on the things that I did. I'm someone who has learned how to take constructive criticism not too personally, but use it in order to improve myself, and continue getting better at my job. And I think again, like just as a general thing, like going back to like internships and things like that, I would like and encouraging you to apply things that maybe not be like your dream job. I think, like I'm saying, the both of these internships at Aldridge and Passion were very rewarding for me. I still learned a lot. I learned a lot about just working in general. They both had like pretty structured internship programs. So, in addition to the work that I was doing, I also did like an end of year intern presentation where I had to like explain what I learned, explain the values that I saw in the company and stuff like that. So, again, just going through emotions, like even if it's a whole summer of an internship that isn't your favorite thing ever, you're going to learn a lot about yourself, a lot about the workforce in general. So I definitely would just encourage you guys to keep your options open, and yeah, not limit yourselves in terms of what you're applying to.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Nanpu, if you have your hand raised, you can go ahead and then I'll return to the chat.
Yeah, hi, could you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Hi, so thank you so Holly for sharing. I am currently a, graduate student and I'm thinking about changing my career directions.
Hmm.
And when I was creating my resume, I just found out that my previous experiences wasn't really applicable. So they were like totally in another field. And I don't know how to deal with this to make my CV still look strong to like a new path. So are there any suggestions you could give?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it definitely would still be beneficial to keep your past experiences on your resume, even if they aren't directly translational to what you're going to be applying to going forward. I think it's good to just show that you have had experience. Also, a lot of times in interviews, the interviewer will ask you like, "Oh, I saw this on your resume. Can you talk a little bit more about that?" And this is kind of going back to what I was saying before about even if the job doesn't translate exactly to what you're doing, you still can learn a lot from it. I know personally in my interview with KPMG, they did ask me about my past internships, And obviously, KPMG is not a construction management company, but I could still speak to those experiences and explain what I learned about myself, what I learned about working, how I problem solved, how I learned to interact with a manager, and things like that. So even if your experience isn't directly translational to what you want to be doing for going forward, I think it's definitely still beneficial to keep that experience on there to show like where you've come from, what you've learned in the past, and how you can use that and translate it to another position going forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, I'm gonna return to the questions in the chat. We have a computer science master's breaking into consulting with a background. How would that look like? I touched on this a little bit earlier, but again, I think you definitely don't have to like close yourself off to a position. Like consulting might be generally a more business background, but I'm an engineering background and I'm going into consulting. I think this kind of just goes back to explaining how you can apply yourself to the position. I think computer science, like engineering, at the end of the day, is all about problem solving. You're probably really familiar with coding, which I know comes across in consulting a lot. I know also sometimes there's, depending on the company, there is like consulting positions that are more specifically technical. So you could look for jobs like that. I think that you would definitely be a good candidate for that. But also, if you kind of want to leave behind the computer science and just focus more on the consulting, I think you definitely still have the skills to do so. Okay, there are job postings with certain deadlines and others without a deadline. When facing time limitations, would you recommend focusing on no deadline posting or those with deadlines? I noticed that some of the non-deadline jobs are being filled very, very fast. Yeah, this is definitely a challenge to the recruiting process. I honestly don't really know why companies don't put deadlines on their postings. I think sometimes, I don't want to say this is like a for sure yes or for sure no, but I think sometimes when there aren't deadlines, it might be a first come, first serve situation. For example, when I applied to KPMG, I know that those were first come, first serve. So I don't even know like when they decide to close it, but like once they've reached a certain amount of applicants, I think they do just close it. So it's not technically a date that you have to fill it by. One piece of advice I would say for this is if there's a specific company and a specific job that you're going for, to try to get in touch with the recruiter. They like a lot of times there's a specific recruiter for either like a region or even specifically for USC. And they're very willing to like help with questions like deadlines and stuff like that. For example, when I was applying to KPMG, the recruiter like sent out an email to us like reminding us that the postings were going live and like to get them in ASAP because they are first come first serve. Um, but with that being said, I know I guess sorry, I'm like going back and forth a lot, but um I think you could kind of make yourself just in general, I guess this goes for everybody too, but when I was applying to jobs, I made like a spreadsheet of everything that I wanted to apply to or was applying to. And I kind of would just break this down into like company, what the job title is, like if you know when it's going to open and if you know when it's going to close. And then you can kind of like use the power of Sheets and or Excel or whatever you're working in. And you could even like filter it by like, oh, let's see which ones are due first. Like, let me make sure I get this one done. Like I know people use that for homework and things like that. So, obviously if applications do take time and do take effort. But I guess just kind of trying to work backwards. So, like, obviously doing the ones that are due first before the ones that are due later. Like, if there's a job posting, that's due in April, probably don't have to do that one first. You could save that one to do when you have a little bit of more time later. Because if it's going to stay open that long anyways, it's less of a priority. Okay. Paul, you can go ahead and then I'll return to the chat again.
You kind of said it, touched on a little bit before in terms of transferable skills.
Mhm.
But I was wondering if there's any specific format or like way of talking about your transferable skills from like a job that is not completely overlapping with what you're applying to.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
mean, the interpersonal skills are, I feel like, the obvious one to like use as a first start, but anything other like
Mhm.
technical skills, or what do you
Yeah,
suggest?
I think I honestly personally didn't do this much, but I know that people do this is like catering your resume to each job that you're applying to. I found, like, personally, I just found this to be a lot of work. But if, again, if there's a job that like you really want, but it's like, oh, I don't know if I'm the perfect fit for this, um, with the use of AI or even just by yourself, you could like feed your resume in and be like, okay, here's my resume right now, here's my experience, and then like here's the job posting that I want, and kind of trying to match like the trigger words on there and things like that. You can definitely kind of cater your experience to fit into what they're looking for. Unfortunately, I guess maybe fortunately, I don't know, but I do know like a lot of companies are using AI to kind of like do that first run through resumes. So maybe if, if you're not the typical fit for it, you're going to just be like shoot out right away. But that's where catering your resume specifically to a job or specifically to a company could be very helpful. You can kind of like tweak what your experience was to highlight what they're looking for. I mean, it's not lying, it's kind of just like stretching it a little bit and making your, and like you can learn how to I guess like learn how to make your experience be a fit for what they're looking for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like adapting what you
Yeah.
did to what the position is.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I think like AI would be a super helpful tool for this. Like you could literally be like, okay, here's my resume, here's the job posting. Like, how would you change my resume in order to make this align better? And I think, I mean, again, you could do this by yourself too, but I think AI would be very helpful in doing that. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the chat. Jackie asks, what were some tips that help you succeed in interviews that you had for your internships? Um, Obviously, interviews. I have a lot of experience doing interviews. One of my biggest tips, which sometimes can be difficult, is to try to make the interview turn into more of a conversation. This is something that is definitely difficult, but if you can find a way to connect with your interviewer and kind of make it flow a little bit more into a conversation versus like, oh, they ask you a question, you answer. They ask you a question, you answer. Um, this might be something as simple as looking up your interviewer beforehand if you know who they are and trying to find a commonality with them. Maybe they went to USC, maybe they were the same major, maybe they're from somewhere that you just went on vacation, something like that. Also, I think when they ask you a question and then you give an answer, then maybe trying to ask them a question back. Again, this will kind of make it just flow more like a conversation, versus just more of a one-for-one interaction. And then my other big piece of advice, as I mentioned earlier, would just to be to practice your answers out loud. Obviously, you're not going to know exactly what they're going to ask you, but you can do your research online, like typical interview questions for this position, or just like typical behavioral questions, or typical case, or I guess case interviewing is a little bit different, but and just actually physically saying those answers out loud. Like I have had like a massive Google Doc with like a bunch of typical interview questions, and I would like type out my answers to those. I also had a list of like go-to stories that I would use. Again, you're not going to know exactly what they're going to ask you, but you can definitely come up with a list of stories or experiences that can kind of fit into different questions. So like what's a challenge you faced or what's a problem you solved or something like that. And just again, like having a short little, not script, but just a little go-to thing that you're going to say and then actually practicing it out loud at least once beforehand will just make you seem that much more comfortable and that much more confident when you do go to say those answers live in an interview. Okay, and then Zenob, you can go ahead.
Yes. So I was wondering a little bit, you talked about how you got your first internship like summer of freshman year. And I was wondering how, like, before you had a ton of work experience, how you tailored your resume, but also how you approach networking and building a connection with like the people around you in order to like get a position.
Yeah, for sure. I know it's hard while you're a freshman and sophomore. You don't really have much experience, so your resume sometimes will and probably will have experience from high school, and that's totally fine. I think like as you continue to grow, it'll just keep evolving. Like I change my resume almost like every 6 months because something new will come in. But I think it's also very normal. I mean, as a freshman in college, you shouldn't really have a lot of experience. And then in terms of like networking and using that, I actually got my first internship through a family connection. One of my uncles works at the company, so I reached out to him and was like, "Hey, could you connect me with the recruiter? I'm curious if they have any job postings." And I think there really should be no shame in doing this. Whether it's a family connection, a friend connection, a teacher mentioned something, I think just being aggressive, being willing to be outgoing and ask about those positions is the only way that you're going to be able to find out about them. Especially as freshmen and sophomores, I know it is harder to secure those internships. So I think just using your network, like even if it's like your best friend's parent who works at a company, like it never hurts to shoot them a text and be like, "Hey, I'm interested," like, or even just talking to them about what they're doing, and that might lead to another conversation or things like that. And then also, I think just networking with the people at USC. I always say that USC is such an awesome place because you're surrounded by so many successful people. I think it's very important to get to know the people in your classes, get to know your teachers, and they'll help you with the experiences. Like if your teacher mentions that they worked at some company or they tell a story or things like that, or even if they're just a teacher that you like, you can go up to them and be like, "Hey, I'm looking for internships this summer. Is there anybody you would recommend I reach out to anywhere I look?" But USC is definitely a place where people are super successful, so definitely try to utilize that network.
So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the chat. Sophomore double majoring in business and applied math and figuring out what field I want to pursue, which has made narrowing my internship search tough. I'm especially interested in startup roles. When would you recommend starting the process, and is it already too late for this summer's cycle? I'm personally not too experienced in the startup role world, I guess. But I do know a lot of people at USC who have been part of startups, who have interned at startups. Um, I don't think it would be too late for this summer cycle. Again, that's going to just totally depend on the company and on the position. But I would say like in terms of when I would recommend starting the process, I think it never hurts to err on the side of being earlier. So if there's a startup that you know about that you're interested in, you can start reaching out to people, you can apply online, you can inquire more about it. But yeah, I would say definitely err on the side of being earlier. And I would encourage you to think that it's not too late for this summer. I think startups also are a little less structured, maybe in terms of like how many interns they're going to take or things like that. So you could definitely reach out and still try for this summer. I would say it's definitely not too late. Okay, we have another question. When I was applying to internship, did you tailor your resume for each application or did you just use one general resume? Also, did you cover soft skills in your resume? I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I personally didn't tailor my resume, but looking back on it, that might have been a little bit of a mistake on my end. Maybe I would have gotten more interviews if I would have done that. Um, one thing about that is that it is very time consuming, obviously, to go through and tailor your resume to a bunch of positions. But I think if you do, like, definitely have one general resume that you think like adequately explains all of your experience, like maybe in a more general way. But then again, if there's a job that you're looking at and you're like, okay, like I'm kind of a fit for this job, but like I don't really know, like if I'm looking at my resume right now, like it doesn't really align, but I feel like I could kind of tweak this to make myself look like a really good fit, then it might be worth your time to change it for that. But like for me, I pretty much did use like one resume for all of my applications. Um, Another thing is I do know people who have like obviously a resume needs to be one page. But I do like some of my friends I know have like a two-page resume of everything that they've done, like all of their experiences, and then depending on what job they're applying to, they'll kind of just highlight and like copy and paste or delete out what they do or don't want for that specific job, depending on what they want to highlight for that job. And then, did I cover soft skills in my resume? I did. I think I don't know if this is necessarily like a need on your resume, but I know that a lot of people do it. I think um, you could also talk more about your soft skills in an interview, but if you have the space on it, I mean, I don't think it hurts to maybe include a short little line of just a list of what you think are your soft skills. Okay, we have what are some skills you would recommend to gain, ones that are still going to have value even with this emerging role of AI and shifting the paradigms even in consulting positions? Yeah, this is a really good question. I think the topic of conversation of AI taking over jobs is definitely a hot one. Um, I think in terms of skills you recommend to gain, um, I guess if there again, if there's a job you're looking at and say they require like I don't know, a super specific skill like oh, you need to know how to do Python for this role and like you're not super familiar with Python, maybe just taking your time to do this by yourself or being like, okay, I don't know how to do Python. I'm not capable of teaching myself how to do Python. Like I'll look for another job. Another thing is again, I haven't really tapped into the full potential of this, but I know LinkedIn Learning is a really good space right now to learn different skills, whether this is like Excel skills, like even just like networking skills, how to write emails, things like that. I started to tap into this actually at my internship. They like had a subscription to a LinkedIn Learning, so whenever I had downtime, I would do that. But I would recommend exploring that a little bit, just to be able to, put those hard skills on your resume and be able to speak to them. Okay. Jonathan says, when an internship application has a lot of essay style questions, is it still worth it to apply for it? How much effort should you put into these essays? Good question. I think this kind of goes back to just like how much you care about the role. Same thing I said for like tailoring your resume. Like, obviously, it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort, and you can't maybe do that for every single job that you see online. Um, I think for the essay style questions, hopefully, if you do begin to do enough applications, you'll kind of have like a little collection of answers that you can pull from so you don't have to start from square one every single time. A lot of times the questions are somewhat similar, you can copy and paste certain sentences. Um, if yeah, and like if it's worth it to apply for it, I think, picture yourself like, oh, would I actually be interested in working here? Like, say I got this and another job, like, would I choose this one? But again, would always encourage, like, if you have the bandwidth for it, like, apply for more, interview for more. It's never gonna hurt to go through the process. The worst thing that's gonna happen is you get a no, and even at that point, it was great practice to go through the steps. Um, and then, yeah, like how much effort you should put in the essays, like however much you're willing to, however much you have the bandwidth for. Like, obviously, you don't need to apply for every single thing online and give it your all for every single thing because no one has the energy and the time for that. But if it's something that you're super interested in that really excites you, you know, you can dedicate a little bit more time for that and see it as a valuable trade-off. Okay, those are all the questions in the chat so far. We still have about 10 more minutes, so if anybody has any other questions, feel free to type them in the chat. You guys can come off mute, turn on your cameras, just introduce yourself and say hi if you want. And then, oh, before I forget, I'm actually gonna drop my LinkedIn in the chat. And then also feel free, my upcoming coffee chats are on there, so you guys are more than welcome to drop in. They'll be very similar format to this one. Um, so yeah. Okay, we have another question. I think USC has free access to LinkedIn Learning as long as one is signed in. Oh, would I need to create a new LinkedIn account then or add my USC email to my LinkedIn account? Um, Honestly, I'm not really sure. That's actually great that USC has free access. I did not know that. But yeah, you might need to unfortunately create a LinkedIn account. Maybe, yeah, I'm actually not sure. I feel like you could probably look into this just by like searching it online. Um, because I feel like there might be a way to just like tack on your USC email in order then to get the access to the LinkedIn Learning. But otherwise you could always make like another LinkedIn account like with your USC email that could just be like a learning space for you. Like obviously then like the LinkedIn Learning badges aren't going to show up on your account, which kind of stinks, but at least you could still go through those trainings and like gain the learning. So, but yeah, I feel like you could maybe look that up just like online. Like my school has access or even like USC has access. Like, can I attach this to my account? Because I'm the same way my LinkedIn is with my personal email. Okay, and then I just dropped my LinkedIn in the chat. You guys can feel free to connect. Also, feel free, my email, I can type it in here too, but it's on the slide. Feel free to send me an email if you guys want to set up another chat one-on-one, or again, you can drop into my other coffee chats. But I'm here as a resource for you guys. So, and also, there are more events coming up through the Career Center and through Industry Insiders. Similarly to how you found this one on Handshake, just keep looking there. We have a lot of exciting events coming up this semester. I actually have an event tomorrow night at 6 p.m., which I'm really excited for, and I'm going to have a panel of different USC alum who worked in analytical and STEM fields or had analytical and STEM backgrounds. Um, and it's going to be all about like networking and having mentors. So I'm really excited about that. So if you guys are available, you can definitely hop on there. But yeah, I appreciate everybody's participation today. And I'll be hanging around for the next 10 minutes or so. So feel free to ask any other last questions. Yes, I can send the link. Hold on. Um, And then you could also find that, I just sent it in the chat, but you can also find it on, again, on Handshake, the same place you found this. It's called Student to Alumni Building Meaningful Connections, and it'll just be another Zoom event. And it's at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Okay, we just got a question. A common piece of advice about resumes is to put a quantitative data about your impact, but what if the role you held required an NDA, so you can't put that sort of data down? That's a good question. I have heard that advice and tried to implement it myself. I guess if you sign an NDA, then you can't exactly put that down. But I would just encourage you to use that advice for other experience. I think people say that just to make it a little bit more tangible. Um, if you say like, "Oh, I helped improve this certain thing," like that's super general. But if you're like, "Oh, I worked on a team of 20 people and we increased sales by 10% or whatever it is," like that just makes it much more tangible, and just really shows that the impact that you had. Um, so for the company where you had the NDA, again, that's going to depend on what you're allowed to say or not to say. But still, I guess just try to make it like as specific as possible and try to really highlight the impact that you had on the project if possible. But again, I know it does get a little bit tricky in those realms.